What's going on, guys? It's your boy Drizzy26 with my guy TJ Zwarych, and we are back here for another edition of FanDuel Friday, and we are on week 14 of this NFL slate. It's a doozy. It's kind of interesting. We have 10 games here to talk about with some of the plays that we like from it. But like I said before, it is very, very interesting with I think the focus being on a few games, but I think there's a couple spots you can get different in and use in GPPs. But let's first see how how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Lots of content today. FanDuel Friday for NBA, Grinders Live for NBA as well. Nice to cap it off with a little NFL. I'm looking forward to Sunday. It's especially on now that I'm not teaching anymore and having to go back to work on Mondays. I'm really enjoying my Sunday night football. My Sunday just day spent watching football.
Yeah, that's amazing. I miss those days. I'll be at work Sunday, but I'll be there sweat. I'll be at work sweating out some of my lineups as always, since I'll be there closing. Retail life, you gotta love it sometimes. But let's just dive right into it here. We got a lot of, like I said, 10 games before. A lot of teams that are in like some slow paced games as far as with total wise and pace wise, being pretty much one sided in a lot of spots. But what is your overall like view of the slate from just looking at it and your glance up that you've seen throughout the week so far?
I mean, the biggest standout is obviously the Detroit and Minnesota game. Highest total on the slate, 1.5 by a lot, by 5.5 points, I think. 1.5 point spread. We're going to see a lot of chalk in that game. The quarterbacks aren't even actually going that highly owned. The quarterback ownership is very spread out this week, and I think that's kind of how it would be for me too. Running three lineups, I think I would go with one full game stack of this game with one Josh Allen, one Jalen Hurts. But it is tempting to run multiple lineups today, like either this Sunday, either like an MME or a 10 to 20 lineup type thing, because after I've paired this a little bit, the kind of quarterbacks in my pool that I'm looking at are Mahomes, Hurts, Allen, Burrow, Prescott, maybe a little Geno Smith, Cousins and Goff, of course. But then I don't even hate the idea of taking some shots on Tyler Huntley, Deshaun Watson, Mike White, and even Sam Darnold against Seattle.
Yeah, I think we're probably a little different on this. Like on here, I think my quarterback pool is gonna be more narrower, but I get what you're saying from you're coming from with some of the plays that you're talking about. Like, for instance, what like as far as Mike White, like I understand that he's been playing well in this Buffalo, and they also lost their Von Miller, who was one of their better defensive linemen and just players on defense in general. But I guess how are you viewing him today on this slate? Like what makes you want to get to him more? I know we know his receiver as far as Garrett's going to be popular on this slate in general, but Mike White as a whole in this matchup against a Buffalo defense that should be tough for them to get some points up. Well, at least a lot of points.
I mean, it's really just about them being 10-point underdogs for me. Like, he's probably going to have to throw the ball a ton against Buffalo. We know Buffalo is going to be scoring some points. He had 57 pass attempts last game, over 300 yards in both games. Last game, the touchdown interception thing just didn't really go his way. He had one really unfortunate tip ball interception and like a bunch of pass drops from his receivers.
Yeah.
Still it threw for over 300 yards. We know they're going to be down and he's going to have to throw the ball lots. And so I just see a guy at 2% ownership that is super cheap, and we know who his main targets are going to be. Nobody's playing him, and he has the upside. To me, that just screams great tournament opportunity.
Yeah, definitely.
And like, again, if I'm running 1 to 3 lineups, I don't think I'm getting any Mike White. But if I'm running 150, that's definitely a guy I'd like to get probably like 8% of.
Okay. Understandable for sure. Who's your favorite quarterbacks to spend on a week?
So my favorite quarterback straight up is Jalen Hurts. Hurts number 1, Allen number 2, Cousins number 3, which just kills me to say because I haven't played Kirk Cousins once in the last like 3 years. And so it just feels like the one time in his dream matchup that he's going to let us down here, that when he's chalk. But it's like you've been saying on all these shows, Detroit has been playing better defense lately. They showed it again a little bit last week. It's still a great matchup. They're still a good matchup in a fast-paced game, but like they're not the absolute dunk that they were earlier in the season. And so I think Hurts is my favorite option, but I definitely don't hate the idea of full stacking with Goff or Cousins.
Yeah, I love Jared Goff on the other side against that Minnesota secondary. Like you said, we saw what Mike White did against them. I think Jared Goff could do the same with Amon-Ra St. Brown, as well as with Swift and his other receivers that he has. I think it's TJ Zwarych is there too back there. So
I think it. I mean, we'll get there when we get there, but I think it's Jameson Williams week.
Okay, yeah, we will get there definitely for sure, because I want to hear your take on that one for sure. But yeah, Jared Goff I think is one of my favorites. I love the spot that he's in. I'm gonna get some Kurt too. I think I'm gonna have probably a lot of exposure to just that game in general, and hoping that it goes over. But I do like that Cleveland Cincinnati game as well. I'm going with a lot of Joe Burrow again this week. I think that he's a very, very, very good play this week. Not getting enough ownership. I hope it goes down a little bit more too with the news of Mixon being in. But we will see. But I do also like the other side too, where you can play Deshaun Watson at 7K. He's still too cheap. I think you still have to take some shots on him, especially while he is that low, because we already know at some point in time, whether it's this year, at some point this year, he's going to have. I think personally, he's going to have one of those games of where he looks like the old Deshaun Watson before he was not playing football for over a year. So I'm going to be well over the field on him as well, especially against a Cleveland secondary that is a little bit banged up, even though they are playing a little bit better from everything I've seen from them on film. And Jalen Hurts, obviously, I think you have to have him because I think that he's just like no one played that man really a lot last week.
He was the only reason I made any of my money back last week.
Yeah, and he was the only reason why I had some. I made some money last week. Like Jalen Hurts has just proven time and time again why he is probably leading the MVP. Why he should be leading the MVP race and not in top 2, in my opinion. And this matchup against the Giants secondary, he should be able to have a field day. Giants have a good pass. I think have a good pass rush on their hands, but and a good front seven or decent front seven, I should say. But that Jalen Hurts is. I think you just have to have him always in tournaments and play. Like if you're running 150, I say you have to play at least like 10 to 15 stacks, maybe 20, because this guy 100%. Can just go off at any given moment. I'm not that high on Josh Allen this week, though. I don't know if that's going to be a mistake, but I think it's just more so I'd rather get to these lower guys who have more upside. I'm not a big fan of Dak either. And I also do love Geno Smith in this spot, too, against Carolina as well. I wanted to mention that briefly.
Yeah, the thing with Allen and Dak both, I don't think I'd get to them in a single entry type lineup this week, but they're both guys that I would try and get a little bit over the field on in MMEs. Like I'd probably try and get around 10% of both of them.
No, understood for sure. So is there anything else you want to talk about before we switch over to running back?
No, let's take the pivot over to running back because I think it is a very, very interesting conversation point this week.
Yeah, definitely for sure. I kind of agree. We got Derrick Henry leading the way. We're the most expensive at 9K going against Jacksonville, followed by Dalvin Cook in a very, very, very good matchup. Well, it's supposed to be a very good matchup on paper against Detroit. And a very popular Christian McCaffrey. If going for Tampa, we're going against Tampa Bay defense that doesn't look the same. And obviously Mixon coming back in Chubb. And Saquon Barkley and Zeke just around at the top between like the top tier between 8K and up. Who's your favorite guys in that range? And are you looking to try to spend up at running back this week?
I'm looking all over the place at running back this week. There's certain guys that I'm very interested in large fields that don't project very well, aren't going to get a ton of ownership, but I think have a ton of upside. And then I do have some preferences here in the expensive range as well. So like what's interesting, the biggest thing that stands out to me is the prices. They've gone way down. The running backs were so hard to get to these last few weeks. Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb were high 9Ks. Now Henry's the most expensive one at 9. Chubb is all the way down to 8.4. Saquon Barkley was above 9, and now he's questionable at 8.2. And so the biggest thing is the prices. It's a lot easier to get to these guys. And while Dalvin Cook is going to be a somewhat popular play, and we love him in this matchup, I think it's interesting that he's the one guy whose price has significantly gone up, while a lot of these other guys prices have gone down. So I do love Cook, and I love the matchup, and I love that game environment, and I have a lot of interest in him in 1 to 3 entry max type scenarios. But in MME large field stuff, I think I'd really try and differentiate and just go all over the place on the running back pool this week. Get some Chubb, get some Derrick Henry, get some Joe Mixon, get a little Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard. But I think the kind of range that I like best is I love Christian McCaffrey. He's like, I think, kind of my top play of the week at the running back position. If I'm spending up for one guy, it's going to be him. And then the other range I really like, I love Travis Etienne at 7.4. I think that he's a great play. DeAndre Swift at 7.2. I love the idea of pairing him. I kind of like the idea of, if I'm doing a Cousins lineup, putting a heavily under-owned Jamal Williams, just because people are expecting more DeAndre Swift this week. And then in my Goff lineups, because of how many targets Swift gets, stacking him with a running back. Because he doesn't really have a tight end that we want to stack with, go with Swift and 2 receivers instead, as opposed to 2 receivers and a tight end. So that's kind of how I like playing Swift. But I also like Miles Sanders, Deontay Foreman. We're expecting, like, Kenneth Walker and DJ Dallas are both questionable. If Walker plays, I don't know how interested I am in him, but we're currently not expecting him to play. And Travis Homer is likely going to be the lead back for Seattle. And so if Travis Homer is the lead back for Seattle, I really like him at 5.8K. And then if I was playing 150 lineups, I'd make sure to mix in a little Tony Jones as well, because that'll be the only other running back on the roster if Dallas and Kenneth Walker are out. So a wide range of guys I like here. McCaffrey is my favorite. Swift, Sanders, Etienne are all guys I'm going to get to decent amounts. But in large field stuff, the Pacheco's, the Jamal Williams, Deontay Foreman, Rashad White, Travis Homer, I think all make for very, very interesting plays.
I completely agree. In my point of view, I love the call with the Dalvin Cook. Honestly, like I would play him probably at the field, maybe a little bit above, because he's only coming at 8K. I mean 8%. That's according to the Blitz projections, ownership projections. So I definitely want to try to get maybe a little bit over on him, but not too much. I
will say though, I don't think I would play Dalvin. I would play Dalvin in one of 3 scenarios. 1, Jared Goff is the quarterback.
Oh yeah, of course.
2, the Minnesota Vikings are the defense. And 3, Goff's not the quarterback, but you also have Amon-Ra St. Brown and one of Smith or Jamal Williams on that team.
Yeah, I think definitely running it back. I think honestly, when you're playing Cook, I feel like you have to run it back. Like, just that whole game environment in general just screams running back, especially since the game is in Detroit. So I think it might be a little bit of a better game, like I said, better game environment than it was early in the year being in Minnesota. But I also do like Nick Chubb here, who's not really getting that much ownership. And we saw what he did to this team a couple of weeks ago. 23 carries, 101 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns for 25 fantasy points pretty much. And he's going well overlooked. I'm going to be well over the field on him just in case. Like, yeah, I do like Watson, and I want to get some Watson, but the Bengals can still be ran on. So I'm going to be well with Phil and Nick Chubb, and I think that that's a great tournament play. Hopefully, me running him out there will get me different and get me to the top of GPPs this week. But I do love the Swift call, especially playing here with Jared Goff. As we've seen here, like you said, the targets have gone up. I mean, targets the past 2 weeks, 8 targets and 6 targets. But then now, along with the rushing attempts being at 14, that's a great sign. So I love playing some DeAndre Swift here a lot, as well as taking the chances on some Jamal Sanders and other lineups. And the way I would play Jamal is I would just run him probably with like a Kirk Cousins stack, probably. Well, definitely.
I'd probably make a rule that Kirk Cousins or Justin Jefferson would need to be in my lineup in order to play Jamal Williams.
I agree with that. No, I would. Why don't you just pair them together? Why don't you just do Kirk Cousins to Jamal? I mean, Kirk Cousins to Jefferson.
Yeah, actually, it makes because this is why. Because I mean, I know every single one of my lineups with Kirk Cousins will have Justin Jefferson, but I would be okay with a skinny stack of that game that where, say, you imagine Jamal Williams scores 3 touchdowns and Minnesota has to try and catch up, and Justin Jefferson has 150 yards and a touchdown, but Cousins doesn't have a big day because he got picked off a couple times. So like I'd pair him with Jefferson, and I guess so. Yeah, I wouldn't have to do Cousins. I could just do with only Jefferson.
Yeah, like I would,
because I won't be playing Cousins without Jefferson.
I personally would do that. I would either play Cousins and Jefferson, and maybe TJ Hawkinson and running back with Jamal Williams, or I'm just playing Jefferson with Jamal Williams, or even I don't even mind taking a shot on this because it can be crazy at times, but playing even TJ Hawkinson and Jamal Williams by themselves together as a stack, I don't like that one that much. I'd rather
I'd rather do it with Jefferson, but I even think it's somewhat interesting to do it with because of how high these offenses are going to be owned this week. I think it's very interesting to make a little like stack rule where you try and get a couple of these in your MME lineups: Jamal Williams and Detroit Lions, Dalvin Cook and Minnesota Vikings. Yeah. But just in case this game doesn't do what everybody thinks it's going to do, and all of a sudden you're way above the field there.
Oh yeah, of course, and I like that too. I think that's another option. That's why I think it's important, like the building process too. Like if you can build earlier, like start building like now Saturday night instead of Sunday morning. I understand we want the news, but we should get majority of the news probably by Saturday. And just maybe have a few guys that are like game time decisions, but you should pretty much have an idea of how teams are looking and what direction they're going towards. So I think having those different types of stacks built and saved, it will be a great benefit to anyone's lineup and help out a lot. I love the Pacheco call too. I played a lot of him last week, honestly. I think he's a great play against this Denver defense. I know that is really good. And everyone's going to be afraid of playing these guys, but Kansas City is going to put up some points. I don't know how many points they're going to put up, but if Pacheco's the one that gets the 2 touchdowns, I want to have a little bit of him. So I would be under the field, but I would sprinkle a little bit of him in there for sure.
He's a guy I'm super excited about for best ball too, because obviously the one thing that has pushed my teams down the last few weeks is not enough Josh Jacobs. But I got a lot of Isaiah Pacheco on my teams, a lot of Isaiah Pacheco. And so I'm hoping he can have a big finish to the season because that will mean for some money for me in best ball because he's one of my highest owned running backs along with Jamal Williams. But what do you say we take it over to the receiving position today? Because there are a lot of
I want to touch on a few other running backs I mentioned briefly too. I have a little bit of interest in the Foreman play that you talked about. Mm-hmm. I think he's a great play. And I don't know if you mentioned Miles Sanders, but Miles Sanders I think is a really good play against his Giants defense. That I think that can easily be attacked, and someone I would definitely run out there for sure. And we get Michael Carter back, so I think he's someone that you could probably play also a little bit in tournaments as well. Now let's take it over to
Doesn't it feel hard to believe just like on any given slate that either Miles Sanders or Jalen Hurts won't be optimal?
It feels weird to say it, but it's the truth. It is definitely the truth. One of these guys could definitely either be optimal. And also, I forgot we've got 2 guys. I forgot these 2 guys are like I think elite tournament plays. I forgot to mention them, and they're not really getting. I think they're going to ownership is going to be a little bit lower on them because no one's really talking about them. Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard. I don't know if Tony Pollard is really like we have right now coming at 15% and Zeke at 10. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to come in lesser owned than this, but they are in a fantastic spot against Houston, and I can see them running the ball and having explosive plays all day on that side of the ball. So yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, let's move on to a wide receiver, where obviously it's headlined by Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and Amon-Ra St. Brown being the top three options here, and obviously the top three most expensive guys here. But for good reason, they are in elite spots here, and they are elite receivers also as well. What is your take on these top three, or is there anyone in particular you're going to want to try to get overweight on than the other?
So you know me, like always, like I'll get a ton of Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and AJ Brown because I'm playing a lot of their quarterbacks, and so just because of that, naturally, those are the receivers I'm going to get the most of. But I mean, I do love Chase and Diggs as well, but I think I'd kind of prioritize it. St. Brown 1, just based on price. St. Brown 1, Jefferson 2, and then AJ Brown 3, specifically because I'd be playing a lot of Jalen Hurts. Now, I would not rank AJ Brown 3 if I was not playing a lot of Jalen Hurts. But the Eagles' pass catching situation is specifically something I want to kind of talk about first here, because Quez Watkins is doubtful. And that's something that should be super minor. But since Dallas Goedert went down, kind of what the Eagles do here is in the last two games, without Goddard, in the last two games, no tight end has stepped up. It's been Quez Watkins with 5 targets in 2 games ago and 6 targets the game before that. He's been getting looks because what they've been doing is Dallas Goedert ran a lot of like slot routes type thing. He'd when in a 3 receiver set, he'd be their 3rd receiver. And so with that being and they'd have a blocking tight end in there. And so with that being the case, what they did when Goddard went out is they started having Devonta Smith run those 3rd receiver tight end routes, kind of the security blanket routes.
Yep.
And then Quez Watkins was in Devonta Smith's spot. And so I think this makes one of 2 things very interesting for tournaments. One, either a $4,900 Zach Pascal, probably likely to see, if he steps into the Quez Watkins role, he's likely to see probably about 5 targets. He had 3 last week. And so at $4,900 playing with the best QB on the slate, I think that he becomes very interesting for tournaments, even more so on the other site that we're not going to talk about. But on FanDuel, I still think he's very interesting as well. And then the other shots I think you can take this week as well, which maybe we will touch more on when we get there, is the tight end position. But Quez Watkins being doubtful, I think actually makes for a very big impact. I think it's a boost to AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. And I also think it makes for the random cheap tight ends and Zach Pascal to be very interesting tournament plays. But getting back to kind of my favorites in general, St. Brown and Jefferson are 1 and 2. Like I would make sure those 2 would be my 2 priorities for cash games this week. They would be the first 2 players I put into my cash game lineup this week would be Justin Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'd figure the rest out later. I'd try and get Jalen Hurts in there. I'd try and get an expensive back or mid-range back in there. But priority 1 and 2 would be Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then I think the 3rd receiver I would want to be plugging into an optimal type setting if I'm not worried about stacks. Like, of course, I always go stack first more than anything. But if I'm not, the 3rd receiver I think I'd be plugging in there would be Garrett Wilson. He had a huge game 2 weeks ago. He had 15 targets with Mike White last week. In a game we're expecting the Jets to have to pass a lot, I think he makes perfect sense for that 3rd guy in. Gabe Davis at 6,200 would be one of my next favorites as well. I think that's just too cheap for him. We know Gabe can always break a slate. DJ Chark getting more and more involved the more he comes off of injury. I think Isaiah McKenzie is somewhat interesting at that cheap spot as well. But then it's that guy that I mentioned before that I wanted to talk about, Jameson Williams. He will go off at some point this year. He was their 1st round pick. He was on the IR all year. He's super speedy. They were as excited about him, if not more excited about him than Amon-Ra St. Brown this year. He hasn't played, just got back last game, very limited snaps, only got one target, but we weren't really expecting anything from him because of how limited hit snaps he was playing. He should be more integrated into the offense this week. He is so fast, and I think their 3 receiver sets this week are going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown, Chark, and Jameson Williams. Yes, I'm sure Reynolds and who is that other one they have there whose name I always forget. I'm sure they'll be mixed in somewhat. I guess no, it's just Reynolds, Chark, and St. Brown right now. Reynolds, I'm sure, will get mixed in, but I think Jameson Williams is going to supplant him this game. And so I think he makes for a very interesting tournament play in a highly owned game because people aren't going to be going to him.
Yeah, exactly. And since there was a quote that said the Lions hope to extend rookie Jameson Williams' role versus the Vikings, and saying that it'll be real exciting if they do.
Dang, I kind of wish that quote didn't come out because I bet that'll boost some ownership to him now.
I don't think so, though, because the reason why I don't think it will, because his
route won't change projections much.
It won't. No, yeah, exactly. So that's the thing. If everyone's using optimal lineups, they're not going to think about it. Like if you're taking 150, I would play him a little bit, but
I'd play probably if I run 150 this week, or even if I run 100, I think I'm going to do 20% Jameson Williams.
That's a lot. I would probably do 10, but I get where you're.
I want to win that first place prize, and I think he's one of the ways you can do it this week.
Oh, I think he is definitely for sure, and I think the Pascal call, if they catch touchdown, honestly, especially on a site like FanDuel, if they catch just one touchdown, you're golden. You're in a great position, and that Jameson Williams call I think it's a great, phenomenal call. He only played, I think, 10 to 15 plays the first game, so it wasn't even that many. So if he's going to see a more expanded role, especially to keep that Minnesota defense on its heels, he can have a big game. So I love the call.
I think it's such an interesting team, such an interesting build to do. Hurts, Brown. I can tell you right now, I will have both of these builds this week. I will be starting a lineup with Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, and AJ Brown. In one of these lineups, I will be going with Justin Jefferson, Jameson Williams, and one of the cheap tight ends for Philly. So I believe the guy that we would be looking at would be, is it Stoll, who's been the guy getting the little baby amount of looks for them so far? Stoll, Calcaterra, and Jackson. If I'm probably going to mess around in the large, the $5 contest with all of these. So I'm going to go Hurts, Brown, Smith, Jefferson in my 3 receiver spots, and Jameson Williams in my flex with each of those 3 cheap tight ends. And I'm going to pay up at running backs with that. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go Hurts, Brown, Smith, and then instead of Justin Jefferson and Jameson Williams, I'm going to do Amon-Ra St. Brown and Zach Pascal. Use TJ Hawkinson as the tight end since that team doesn't have Justin Jefferson, and then who knows what at the running back position. But I think that's just beautiful tournament correlation.
I don't think that's a bad tournament correlation at all. I like this one too. Like since we were talking about building a little bit, since you mentioned that Jameson Williams call, got me thinking, what if you did this little combo right here, obviously, which I think won't be popular at all. Do I have them eliminated? No, I don't. Okay.
I'll have this. That's why I'm going to be, I don't know how many lineups I'm going to build this week, but I don't think I'm going to do any high dollar stuff. I'm just going to keep building $5 teams until I run out of ideas.
So you build $5, because that's the problem. I think we both are one and the same. Once we get an idea, we have an idea. I would run that.
Because I love that too. And then you add, I would have that team variation. But I'd also have variations where I'd run Dalvin Cook in there as well.
Yeah,
And then I'd have, and in the ones that I had Cook, I would add Swift or Chark.
yeah, and if you really want to make it like a full game, yeah, obviously just add one of the running backs. Like
Like add Cook and Chark or Cook and Swift, and then you only like if that game ends up being 45-40, you will win first place.
exactly like that just does that, and you still have a good amount of money left over. You add Swift here, you still have a good and it's low ownership still.
Oh,
Like
and I mean, no, actually, I feel terrible that my first reaction was about an injury was excited. I just saw I'm not excited that Markelle Fultz is hurt. I want the best for Markelle Fultz. I've been cheering for him from the get-go. I just faded heavily on Markelle Fultz tonight as we record this, and so I'm happy that he's not going to have a big game.
I didn't understand him being popular, so I didn't play him.
Me neither.
But like just this build right here in general. I know we haven't gotten to the tight end real quick, but I think we should do this actually maybe every week a little bit. Just give a little brainstorming idea of like low owned plays. Like I don't think no one would even think to play something like this. Like this is, I think, a very interesting GPP spot where you have 3 spots where you can even put whatever you want and make it work. And there's this defenses that I feel like we could pay mid grade for that we like a lot, or even pay towards the bottom for. So like this build is going to be something I'm going to try to be. I might have to run one like this. Honestly, TJ, you gave me an idea, and like you said, we could do this 150 probably ways of this game. So, but let's get back. Try to get back on track real quick and get to some of the rest of the wide receivers. Is there anyone else you want to mention?
I don't really think so. Outside of the stuff we've already talked about to this point, I'm just going to be doing some stacks. Like that's really going to be the only place I'm going to go. Like I'll play a little Josh Allen, and so I'll do full stacks with Diggs and McKenzie and Davis. I'll play some KJ Osborne and Adam Thielen in my Kirk Cousins stack, stuff like that. Elijah Moore and Corey Davis, they'll make their way into my Mike White stacks, that kind of thing. I do think it's worth mentioning that Isaiah Hodgins for the Giants has been getting more targets every week. He got 6 targets last week, including a touchdown. That could be somewhat interesting as a salary saving option. And then last week, no, I don't think I can get to any Terrace Marshall. I'm just trying to finalize my pool here. The Chiefs receivers, I'm probably only going to play with Mahomes. I'll mix in a little Kadarius Toney if he plays, Valdez Scantling, and then if Toney doesn't play, with obviously Juju, and then if Toney doesn't play, I'll add Sky Moore and Justin Watson back to my pool. But outside of those guys we mentioned, it's just going to be filling up stacks.
Yeah, I think, and that's my whole point too. Like, I love these top 3 guys, but I'm going to play a lot of these guys with their stacks. For the most part, it makes it up a lot. I do like T Higgins as well in a good spot here. I also do like this game.
Christian Kirk and Zay Jones, I will like only if Trevor Lawrence plays.
I was just about to say that Christian Kirk. I like that game in general because I can run Christian Kirk and run it back with Derrick Henry. So he's someone I have a lot of interest in. I like Donovan Peoples-Jones a lot this week. I'm probably gonna be well over the field on him. I like DJ Moore a lot too as well. So I'm gonna be getting to a lot of these guys. Probably a lot of this mid-tier range here. I think I'll be in. I'm living in a lot for my plays. Besides going to some cheap guys that we talked about already that I think are interesting for tournaments, especially if they just catch a touchdown. And Adam Thielen is still getting overlooked, going in at 8-9%. I want to be well over the field on that too as well. So I think
it's a good look. Is it nuts to think we can play Daniel Jones in tournaments? Because I actually think I kind of like him.
I'm not going that route. But
over 50 yards and over 7 rushing attempts on the ground in 2 of his last 3 games. He's $6,900, which is the second cheapest he's been all season. Last 3 games, 31 pass attempts, 35 pass attempts, 44 pass attempts. He's gone over 25 twice this year, which for that price is fantastic. It's a divisional game where they're on the road. It's a divisional game where they're at home and they're 7-point underdogs with a questionable Saquon Barkley. We look at this receiver position where we got some cheap receivers, and some of the guys that I'm noticing have decent projections and who have gotten a lot of targets. Darius Slayton, Isaiah Hodgins, and then there's even a guy like I believe he might be questionable right now, but who's that other slot receiver of theirs that you don't mind sometimes? Richie James Jr. Yeah. So no, he's not questionable, but another guy with a decent projection. Like those are some decent stackable players with him. And I think if you're running 150, he's an interesting guy to keep in the pool, but that's enough spent time talking about Daniel Jones.
Yeah, I agree because I don't think like just for the record, he's only had one 300-yard game against them. That was his first start against them. Granted, the last two starts I think he's played against them, I think he has won both of them. But I think this is a totally different year. He's only thrown a total of 4 touchdowns, and that was pretty much one in the first game he played, 2 in the second, none in the third, and 1 in the fourth game.
But do you know what's worth more than throwing touchdowns is when he runs them in.
Yeah, true, but he hasn't really. I don't even think he has any rushing touchdowns from what I'm seeing here either. He has maybe 1 or 2, but I just don't. I don't think the upside is this there. Maybe, and that's just me personally, but
he's got 4 rushing touchdowns this year, and then it's just like I see 12 rushing attempts for 71 yards last game. 2 games ago, 7 for 50. 5 for 24, 6 for 20, 11 for 107. He's a running QB at home in a divisional matchup where they're down, where they're 7-point underdogs. I think there's upside there.
There's some, but I don't know. I don't like his receiving core enough to make it a priority for me personally. But
that's
hey, if you want to run him out there, run him out there. Tyler Boyd also is interesting too, in my point in GBPs as well. And Isaiah McKenzie always is a good play. Let's move on to tight end. I think this is going to be a very quick conversation because there is not that many tight ends I think that are in play for me, at least on this slate. Obviously, it's headlined by the 2 top guys in Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews. But we also have TJ Hawkinson, who's been working to the mix and getting a lot of work, a lot of targets thrown his way lately. And then Dalton Schultz as well, with George Kittle and Pat Fry moved to round out like kind of the top upper echelon. And then obviously we have Njoku coming back and Greg Dulcich, yep, in a great spot with Sutton not playing this week.
I hate how many tags we have on Denver Broncos this week.
And that's scary.
It's terrifying.
Because Russell Wilson can let them down, and I played that. I ran that experiment, and it was not a good experience, honestly. So I don't know how much I really want to get back on that train.
I would maybe hand build 1 Russell Wilson stack in this game, but that would be like if I was running 150. But that would be it.
Yeah,
have him on 0.75% of teams.
Yeah, I feel you. So, how are you looking at tight end this week? Is there anyone else that you're looking to try to get, or just like you said, running these guys with your stacks? Because that's what I'm doing. I'm running my tight ends exclusively, and pretty much in like 85% of my lines in stacks.
Yeah, 100%. That's always how it goes for me. Like I'll have some Kelce outside of those stacks, but my biggest priority is going to be TJ Hawkinson. That's kind of priority 1 for me this week. Mark Andrews, I do still really like. Like, I kind of think he's going to go overlooked because there's no Lamar Jackson, but he still had 7 targets last week. And, I mean, this is going to be by far the number 1 receiver for Huntley. And so just with him being a tight end, I think he's still interesting. I don't love the Greg Dulcich play. Like, I don't think that's for me. High ownership on a guy like that just scares me. He gets a decent amount of targets, and it's a really good matchup, but I kind of want to take some shots on some cheapies, like some Jack Stoles, Jordan Akins, Mitchell Wilcox for Cincinnati with no Hayden Hurst. Stuff like that. I think I kind of want to take some shots on because I just don't really like tight end this week outside of Hawkinson and Kelsey.
Yeah, I kind of agree in a little bit since I'm only going to be playing Kelsey, Andrews, Hawkinson mainly. Maybe a little bit of Greg Dulles, but maybe I don't know. I have to see how my builds go, but I don't know if I'm going to get a lot of them because I just prefer a guy like TJ Hawkinson, like you said, over everyone else. I don't mind going with Dalton Schultz here as well in this spot against Houston. So those are the guys I'm going to try to be heavier on and have my exposure to. Tyler Conklin, I think, is an interesting play. Always, I think as long as Mike White is at quarterback, he's interesting. 7 targets his last game, and then he obviously got 3. He was 3 for 3 his first game when Mike White started for 50 yards. So I think Conklin is a tournament play that I want to get to, and obviously he had a good game. I think
I
he
had
had a good game
I
here.
had so much of him last week, and he dropped 3 wide open passes. One of them was in the end zone. It was just devastating. He should have had so many points, and he was just dropping balls after ball. Oh, it made me so upset. But
So
I
he
think
keeps ownership down, so that's why I
true.
think it's a good play this week.
Another guy I think is interesting in the cheap range. Speaking of Daniel Jones, is his tight end Daniel Bellinger. He's been hurt lately, and then he came back up off the IR last week, and he had 5 targets in his first game back. Jones had been going to him a lot earlier in the year. He had 5 targets in his last game before he got hurt as well. So 4,800 Bellinger, especially in there's your perfect cheap tight end to play with Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, Zach Pascal, and AJ Brown in that lineup we were talking about. Run it back with if we think they're going to score a lot of points, run it back with one giant and have it be a cheap tight end who's probably going to get 5 targets.
Yeah, exactly, and I don't mind that play at all for sure. So. I have nothing else at tight end. I'm literally have a small pool. Have probably like 6 or 7 tight ends that I have in mind this week, honestly.
It'll be a small pool for me too. We can swap it over the defense position where I think it's going to be much more of a defense stacking type week for me than it usually is. And I'll play some. I love the Dallas Cowboys as my favorite defense, and it's wild that they're over 5K. Have you ever seen that before? A 5.2K Dallas Cowboy defense, but I think they've earned the right to be there, and with how many points they've scored this year, and also what we just saw Cleveland's defense do to Houston last week. Cowboys are my favorite defense. I think they're interesting to pay up for, especially with all the random cheap plays that we like this week. And then from there, a lot is still dependent. Like the Titans will be my favorite defense if Trevor Lawrence doesn't play. As it stands right now, if I can't pay up for the Cowboys, I think I don't mind the Chiefs, the Seahawks, the 49ers, but I think my favorite is going to be the $4,100 Baltimore Ravens. I think they're in just a fantastic spot against Pittsburgh. Nice high-scoring defense. Yeah, Pittsburgh might score some points. Baltimore might lose this game, but I think they should get a decent amount of sacks, hopefully cause a turnover or 2 in this one. And then for large field stuff, I think it's super, super interesting to take shots on the Lions and the Vikings and pair them with their running backs in those games.
Yeah, I don't mind any of those calls at all. One defense I don't want to forget to mention is Denver. I think Denver, even though we project them to lose, that game could really be a slow paced game. But I think that still going against Mahomes, and it could obviously be a little bit of an issue, but they still have one of the best defenses in the league. And it's just the offense is not clicking right now with them. So I think we can play those guys a lot. Pittsburgh will be popular, rightfully so. I think that they are probably the best. They're the probably best defense to play. Just their pass rush, I think, is just really good with Watt being back there as well.
Watt is questionable for this game, so downgrade them heavily. And they're probably like your cash game play with their heavy ownership this spot. But if Watt doesn't play, they become an amazing fade on this slate.
If they're going to be high owned, yes. If they're not going to be, but if that still brings it down, I might want to get all over it. It depends. It's going to really depend on how that works out. I guess come Sunday morning, I guess when it's decided really.
I think the Bucks are an interesting pivot off of them for almost the same salary, playing against the backup quarterback as well.
Playing against Mr. Relevant, I actually don't mind that play. I don't. I think that's a good one. And Kansas City, we know Russ has not been good.
I'm going to keep basically every defense in the pool this week. The only ones I have crossed out right now are the Giants and the Texans.
I'm going to probably have I'm going to narrow my defenses down to probably try to narrow down to 10 to 11. I'm gonna pick apart every little bit of it, but I'm gonna narrow it down a lot. And the Jets can still have a good game against Daniel Jones, and he's only gonna be 1% owned. I'm against Josh Allen. Sorry, I don't mind that play at all either. So
yeah, Giants and Texans at this point are the only ones I have X'd out. I think there's some I'll try and get more of, but I'm gonna try and get 3 to 5% of all these other defenses, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll see what happens. They can honestly, defense is more of a crapshoot anyway. So hopefully just pick the right ones and it pays off for us. But before we get out of here, TJ, what is your top stack that you think is going to take it down on FanDuel this week?
I think you stack the Eagles receivers with Jalen Hurts and you finish the lineup with pieces from the Vikings and Lions game.
Okay. I personally think it's going to be I really do. I think it's going to be the Detroit side of that game. I like golf a lot. So, it's going to be a Jared Goff game stack, I think, with Justin Jefferson run back to win it all this week. Because Jared Goff is not going to be that high on as a quarterback, and I think he will be one of the highest on the slates. And if not him, it's going to be Joe Burrow. So, any last things before we get ready to get out of here?
No, I think that's all of it. I got a Christmas party to go to, some fun NBA to watch. Let's get out of here.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. So, I'm Andre, and this is TJ, and good luck to everyone this week, and hit the like button, and we'll see you next week.